The station known as Concord Spire drifted in silent balance between three stars. Its halls were wide, polished, and filled with species from dozens of worlds, yet one subject made even the most confident diplomats lower their voices. The alien queen of the Zalthari. Her name could not be spoken in most languages. It was not because it was forbidden, but because the sound itself caused discomfort. The Zalthari were an ancient species, tall and luminous, their forms wrapped in flowing membranes that glowed softly with inner light. Their queen was older than many civilizations, and her presence was not something that could be ignored. She did not threaten, she did not command with force. She simply existed, and that was enough. For centuries, the galactic Concord had maintained peace through tradition rather than war. One of its oldest rituals was the vigil. When a species faced internal crisis or political fracture, its ruler would invite a representative from another world to spend one full night cycle alone with them. No guards, no translators, no barriers, just shared presence and conversation. The idea was simple: understanding prevented conflict. For most rulers, the vigil was symbolic. For the Queen of the Zalthari, it was impossible. Her species communicated through layered emotion and shared memory. Their queen carried the weight of her entire people within her mind. To stand near her was to feel centuries of responsibility, sorrow, and expectation pressing inward. Species with psychic sensitivity collapsed within moments. Species without it still reported crushing anxiety, racing thoughts, and an overwhelming need to flee. Some tried, none stayed. The Concord had recorded 12 failed vigils with the Zalthari queen. Each one ended early. Each refusal was polite, respectful, and quietly fearful. Over time, invitations stopped being sent. The queen remained unvisited, unchallenged, and alone. She did not complain, but the silence around her grew heavier with every passing cycle. When humanity joined the galactic Concord, they were considered unremarkable. Their technology was functional, not elegant. Their ships were sturdy but inelegant. Their biology was fragile by galactic standards, lacking claws, armor, or natural psychic defenses. They were curious, cooperative, and very good at surviving. Most species assumed humans would keep to minor roles: trade support, translation assistance, cultural exchange. No one expected them to matter during a crisis. The crisis came quietly. Within the Zalthari domain, subtle fractures began to form. Younger collectives questioned the queen's isolation. They wondered if her uncompleted vigil was a sign of stagnation. The Concord, sensing instability, revived the ritual. A vigil would be attempted again. The list of candidate species circulated through the spire. Names were considered, names were withdrawn, excuses followed. Scheduling conflicts, medical advisories, diplomatic sensitivity. When the rotation reached humanity, the expectation was immediate refusal. The human delegation gathered in a modest conference room overlooking the stars. The walls were plain. The chairs were slightly uncomfortable. There were no glowing symbols or ceremonial banners. Elias Morrow sat near the end of the table, hands folded, listening. He was not important. Officially, he was a cultural liaison, third tier. His job involved observing alien customs, writing reports, and occasionally explaining human habits to confused non-humans. He had no command authority, no enhancements, no psychic training. His record was clean, quiet, and forgettable. The ambassador spoke with careful words. She explained the situation. She described the queen's presence. She outlined the risks, both diplomatic and personal. "We are not required to accept," she said. "Refusal will not harm our standing." There was a pause. Several humans shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. Another shook her head. Elias raised his hand. The room went still. "Yes," the ambassador said, surprised. "I can do it," Elias said simply. She stared at him. "You understand what this is?" "Yes." "You've read the reports?" "Yes." "You know no one has stayed the full night?" "Yes." Another silence followed, thicker this time. "Why?" someone asked. Elias thought for a moment. "Because someone should." That answer did not satisfy anyone, but it was honest. Medical scans showed nothing remarkable. Psychological evaluations labeled him as stable, adaptable, and mildly stubborn. There was no clear reason to disqualify him. There was also no better candidate. 2 cycles later, Elias stood alone outside the queen's chamber. The corridor was empty, its walls faintly luminous, pulsing in slow rhythm like a sleeping heart. There were no guards, no observers. The door before him was not a door in the human sense. It was an opening shaped by shifting light. A voice, neither loud nor soft, resonated directly within him. "You may enter." Elias inhaled, then stepped forward. The chamber was vast, open, and strangely simple. No throne, no symbols of power. The queen stood at its center, tall and radiant, her form layered with translucent folds of light. Her eyes, if they could be called that, were deep pools of shifting color. The moment Elias crossed the threshold, the pressure hit. It was not pain, it was weight. Thoughts pressed against his own, not as words but as feeling, grief without memory, responsibility without choice. Loneliness stretched across centuries. His chest tightened, his breath caught. For a brief moment, instinct screamed at him to leave. He did not. Instead, Elias did what he had learned to do his entire life. He noticed his breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. He looked around, grounding himself in physical details, the faint warmth of the floor, the gentle hum in the air. The steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The queen did not move. "You may speak," she said, the words forming gently in his mind. "Okay," Elias replied aloud. His voice sounded small in the chamber, but it was real, and that mattered. "I'm Elias. I was told to spend the night with you." A pause. "That is correct." Another wave of emotion rolled through him, heavier this time. Elias sat down on the floor. It was not an act of disrespect. It was necessity. "I'm going to stay here," he said, mostly to himself. "If that's all right." The queen inclined her head slightly. Time passed. At first, Elias said nothing. He focused on staying present, on not panicking. The pressure never faded, but it stopped increasing. It became like background noise, a storm heard from inside a shelter. Eventually, he spoke again. "No one ever asks how you're doing," he said. The queen's light flickered almost imperceptibly. "They ask many things." "I figured," Elias said, "but that's not the same." "Why do you remain?" He considered the question carefully. "Because leaving wouldn't help either of us." That answer lingered between them. As the artificial lights dimmed to signal the beginning of the night cycle, Elias felt exhaustion settle into his bones. The queen remained standing, timeless and patient. "You don't sleep?" he asked. "Not as you do." "Right," he said. "Lucky you." A faint ripple of something passed through her presence. Not amusement exactly, but curiosity. Elias leaned back, staring at the distant ceiling. "I'm probably not what you expected." "You are not." He smiled weakly. "Story of my life." The night stretched on, quiet but not empty. For the first time in centuries, the queen of the Zalthari was not alone, and the humans stayed. The night cycle continued without clear markers of time. There were no clocks in the queen's chamber, no windows showing stars. The only sign of passing hours was the slow shift in the light that filled the vast space, dimming and brightening like a calm breath. Elias remained seated on the floor at first. His back rested against a smooth, warm surface that seemed to adjust slightly to support him. The pressure of the queen's presence never vanished, but it changed. It became less sharp, less overwhelming, like a heavy coat he had stopped noticing. The queen watched him. She had observed countless beings over her long existence, warriors who stood stiff with pride, diplomats who masked fear behind careful words, scholars who tried to analyze her instead of understanding her. None of them lasted long. Their minds fractured under the shared weight of her thoughts, even when she restrained herself. The human was different. He breathed slowly. His thoughts moved in clear, simple paths. When emotion brushed against him, he acknowledged it instead of fighting it. When fatigue crept in, he adjusted his posture rather than resisting it. "You are still present," the queen noted. "Yeah," Elias said softly, "still here." Why? The question was not sharp, it was not a challenge. It carried genuine curiosity. Elias took a moment before answering. "Because leaving would mean I failed," he said, "and because you haven't asked me to go. You would leave if I did." He considered that. "If you wanted me gone, I'd respect that, but I don't think that's what you want." Another pause followed. The queen's light shifted, subtle patterns moving across her form. "You assume much." "I do," Elias admitted. "Humans do that a lot. Sometimes we're wrong." "Why risk being wrong?" "Because sometimes we're right." The queen absorbed this without comment. As time passed, Elias grew more comfortable speaking, not because the pressure lessened, but because silence felt heavier than words. He spoke about small things at first, his home world, the ocean sounds near the city where he grew up. The way humans named constellations after stories instead of facts. The queen listened. "Your species fills silence with meaning," she observed. "Yeah," Elias said. "Silence makes us nervous." "Silence is peace." "For some," he replied. "For us, it's complicated." As the hours moved forward, Elias felt waves of emotion that were not his own. Regret, duty, endless patience stretched thin. He realized these were not directed at him. They simply existed around the Queen, constant and unfiltered. "That's a lot to carry," he said quietly. "It is my function. Doesn't mean it's easy." "Ease is irrelevant." Elias shook his head. "Humans don't think that way. If something hurts, we notice." "Why? Because ignoring pain doesn't make it go away." The Queen did not respond immediately. The light around her dimmed slightly, as if considering his words. "You experience pain differently." "Yeah," Elias said. "We're not built to handle everything at once. That's why we talk or joke or complain." "Complain," he smiled faintly. "It's a survival skill." At some point, fatigue claimed him more deeply. His eyelids drooped, his thoughts slowed. Without realizing it, he shifted until he was lying on his side, one arm tucked beneath his head. The Queen did not move away. "You trust me?" "I guess I do," Elias murmured, half asleep. "Why?" "Because you haven't hurt me." "I could." "I know," he said, "but you haven't." Sleep took him gently. The Queen remained still, watching the human rest within her presence. No visitor had ever slept in her chamber before. Sleep required safety, trust, vulnerability. These concepts were not foreign to her, but they were distant, like memories from another age. As Elias slept, his mind did not fully close. Fragments of human thought drifted, unguarded. Simple images, a shared meal, laughter echoing in a narrow hallway. A feeling of being small but not alone. The Queen did not intrude, she only observed. When Elias woke, he was disoriented for a moment. The light had shifted again, warmer now. He sat up slowly, stretching stiff muscles. "Sorry," he said, embarrassed. "Didn't mean to fall asleep. You were unharmed." "Yeah," he said, "that's why I slept." That answer stayed with her. They spoke again, more easily this time. Elias asked questions not about power or politics, but about her people, their history, their fears, their hopes. The Queen answered carefully. She was unused to being asked such things without expectation of leverage. "You do not seek advantage." "No," Elias said, "just understanding." "Understanding leads to change." "Sometimes," he agreed. "Sometimes it just helps people feel less alone." Alone, the word echoed. The Queen had ruled for longer than Elias' species had known fire. She was surrounded by millions, connected by shared consciousness, yet isolated in ways none of them could be. "Humans are alone even together," she observed. "Yeah," Elias said. "That's why we work so hard to connect." As the artificial dawn approached, the Queen felt something unfamiliar. The weight she carried remained, but it was distributed, not reduced, but shared in a way she had never allowed before. The human did not solve anything. He simply stayed. When the light brightened fully, signaling the end of the night cycle, Elias stood. His body ached. His mind was tired, but he was still steady. "I think that's it," he said gently. "The night's over." Yes, neither moved for a moment. "You may leave," the Queen said at last. Elias hesitated. "I can come back," he offered, "if you want." The Queen regarded him, her presence calm but attentive. "This vigil is not yet complete." He nodded. "Then I'll be ready." As he stepped toward the chamber's edge, the pressure lessened slightly, as if acknowledging his departure without pushing him away. Outside, unseen observers confirmed what no one expected. The human had stayed the entire night. And the Queen had allowed it. The hours after Elias left, the chamber felt different to the Queen of the Zalthari. The space was the same. The light pulsed in its usual rhythm. Her presence remained vast and layered, filled with memory and duty. Yet something subtle had shifted, like a tone slightly out of tune, now slowly correcting itself. She waited. Waiting was not unusual for her. She had waited through the rise and fall of empires, through generations of her own people growing and fading within the shared mind. But this waiting felt focused, intentional. Elias Mara returned exactly when he said he would. There was no ceremony when he entered the chamber again, no announcement. He simply stepped through the light-shaped threshold and paused, letting the pressure settle over him. This time his reaction was calmer. He did not freeze, he did not sit immediately. "Good morning," he said, then corrected himself. "Or whatever this counts as for you." The Queen observed him closely. "You returned." "Yeah," Elias said. "I said I would. Most do not. I know." "You were not required to." "I wasn't," he agreed, "but I wanted to." The Queen did not respond at once. Her presence shifted, gentle waves of thought brushing against him. Elias felt curiosity, careful and measured, like a hand testing unfamiliar ground. "You are tired." "Very," he admitted, But that's normal for humans. We get tired, then we rest, then we keep going. Why continue when rest is incomplete? Because life doesn't wait for us to be ready, Elias said. We just adapt. Adaptation is survival. Exactly. He sat again more comfortably this time, legs crossed, hands resting loosely on his knees. The floor adjusted to his weight as before. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. The queen noticed how quickly he settled. His mind still reacted to her presence, but it no longer resisted. It accepted, adjusted. You are learning. So are you, Elias replied. That statement would have unsettled many rulers. From him it felt neutral, observational. They spoke for a long time. Not all of it was spoken in words. Sometimes Elias would trail off, staring into the light, feeling emotions that were not his own pass through him like weather. Other times the queen would remain silent, absorbing his simple descriptions of human life. He told her about night shifts on orbital stations, about shared meals eaten quickly before work resumed, about humans forming bonds not because they shared thoughts, but because they chose to stay connected despite misunderstanding. We're bad at reading each other, Elias said at one point. We guess wrong all the time, but we keep trying. Why? Because being alone hurts, he said simply. The queen understood pain. She had known loss on a scale Elias could barely imagine. Entire collectives fading, memories dimming, voices falling silent within the shared mind. Yet his words touched something different. Humans choose connection despite uncertainty, she said. Yeah, it's kind of our thing. You risk rejection. All the time. Why accept that risk? Elias shrugged. Because sometimes it works. The queen considered this deeply. Among her people, connection was certain. Minds joined at birth, shared thought, shared emotion. There was no rejection, but there was also no choice. The queen carried them all always. Humans are alone even when together, she said again. And together even when alone, Elias replied. It's weird. As cycles passed, news spread quietly through the conquered. Observers noted changes in the queen's psychic field. It was still immense, still overwhelming, but no longer sharp at the edges. Species passing near Zalthari space reported less distress. Diplomats found negotiations less exhausting. No official announcement was made. Inside the chamber, Elias noticed the change too. It feels lighter, he said carefully. It is not lighter, the queen corrected. It is shared differently, he nodded. That counts. You do not seek to change me. No, Elias said, I just listen. Listening is rare. Yeah, he said, even among humans. As their conversations deepened, Elias began to feel the true weight the queen carried. Not just leadership, but expectation, to be constant, to be unchanging, to be perfect. That sounds exhausting, he said one cycle. It is necessary. Is it? The question was soft, but it echoed. Your people rely on my stability. So do ours, Elias said, but our leaders still change, they grow, sometimes they fail. Failure is dangerous. So is never changing, he replied. The queen did not answer immediately. When she did, her presence carried something new. Uncertainty. If I change, I risk them. If you don't, Elias said gently, you risk yourself. The idea of self was complex for her. She was many and one, ruler and vessel. Yet the human spoke as if she were a single being with needs of her own. You see me as an individual. Yeah, Elias said. Is that wrong? No one had ever asked that. It is unfamiliar. That's okay, he said. You don't have to decide anything now. Another night cycle passed. Then another. The vigil extended beyond all previous records. The conquered debated quietly. Some feared dependency. Others feared precedent, but none could deny the results. Stability was returning to the Zalthari domain. Inside the chamber, Elias grew thinner. Dark circles formed beneath his eyes. His body showed strain, but his resolve remained. You are harming yourself, the queen observed. I'm okay, he said, though his voice wavered. You lie, he smiled weakly. Humans do that too. Why remain when it costs you? Because it matters, he said, and because you matter. That statement sent a ripple through her presence. No one had ever said that to her without condition. You will leave eventually. Yeah, Elias said softly. I know. Will you forget me? He shook his head. No. Will your people forget? Maybe, he admitted, but I won't. The queen felt something tighten within her vast awareness, a sensation close to fear. The final cycle of the vigil approached. Elias stood one last time in the chamber, steadier than when he arrived, yet visibly worn. This might be my last night here, he said, I know. You're going to be okay, he added, unsure why he felt the need to say it. The queen regarded him, her presence calm but focused. You have altered the pattern. Yeah, he said. Humans tend to do that. As the light dimmed, Elias sat once more. He did not fight the weight. He did not try to escape it. He stayed. And the queen, for the first time in her long existence, allowed herself to rest within shared understanding. The vigil was nearing its end. And nothing in the galaxy would remain the same. Elias had become part of the queen's chamber almost as if he belonged there. Not in the sense that he had power or authority, but in the quiet way presence can become familiar. The light around the queen shifted subtly with his movements, softer now, less sharp. Her ancient mind no longer radiated pressure as a weapon. It was more like the pull of a calm tide, steady and persistent. The human had stayed the course, and in doing so, he had done what no other species could. He had endured without trying to conquer, without attempting to manipulate or escape, without hesitation or complaint. He simply remained. He rose slowly from the floor, feeling his body stiff from hours of sitting and lying in one place. His muscles ached, and small knots of fatigue tugged at him, but his mind was clear. The night had taught him more about endurance than any training could. He had not only survived, it felt as though he had reached into the mind of the queen, brushing against centuries of solitude, and met it without fear. And in doing so, he had left a mark, though neither of them could yet define it fully. The queen watched him silently, letting her presence flow around him, neither shielding nor striking. It was rare for her to be still and patient in the presence of a visitor, rarer still for someone to observe her so fully without flinching. She sensed that something fundamental had shifted. The vigil, which had always been about testing and endurance, had become a bridge. Through quiet dialogue and simple presence, the human had brought a new quality to her life, shared experience without demand. She had not only survived the night with him, she had learned from him. "You are persistent," she said, her voice a thought more than sound, resonating directly in his mind. It was not a question. "I guess you could say that," Elias replied, voice soft. "I just thought it was worth trying. You've waited so long, I didn't see why I shouldn't help." Help, the word was foreign to her. She had ruled through responsibility, not assistance. Her presence, her psychic weight, had been enough to enforce order without direct intervention. But now, standing in front of him, she understood that help did not have to be a command, a threat, or a burden. It could be as simple as sitting and listening. "You change the flow," she said. "My presence, it is no longer the same." "It didn't need to be," Elias said. "It's better this way, I think. You've carried it for so long, maybe it's time someone helped carry it with you." There was a subtle shift in her light, almost like the first blush of dawn. Elias noticed it and smiled faintly. He had learned to recognize small patterns and subtle cues from her, as if reading a language beyond words. He had not expected to understand her fully, but understanding was not necessary. Recognition, observation, and choice were enough. They sat together in quiet, each aware of the other's presence but not speaking for long stretches. Outside the chamber, the galaxy continued as it always had, unaware of the subtle change unfolding within the walls of the Queen's domain. But within that space, something significant had shifted. The human had endured what others could not, and the Queen had adapted in ways she had never anticipated. "You will leave soon," she said, her voice steady, "and yet you will remain." Elias tilted his head, sensing the meaning behind the statement. "I'll remember," he said simply. "That's the best I can do." Her thoughts, normally vast and consuming, focused on that simplicity. A single human mind, so small compared to hers, yet unyielding in its clarity and purpose. She realized that the human capacity to endure solitude, to act without coercion, and to remain calm in the face of overwhelming pressure was a power she had never encountered. This resilience, quiet and persistent, was uniquely human. It was not strength in the conventional sense, nor intelligence that could compute millions of equations. It was the ability to choose to remain when all instincts screamed to leave. It was the endurance of the mind, the willingness to face weight without flinching, the capacity to act with compassion and patience. "Humans are remarkable," she said, not a statement but a meditation. She had encountered countless species, yet none had demonstrated this combination of perseverance, flexibility, and empathy. She wondered how they survived in a universe that was often harsh and indifferent, yet she saw now that survival was more than biology or technology. It was resilience, curiosity, and the determination to endure together. Elias listened, sensing her thought without needing to respond. Sometimes words were unnecessary. Sometimes the simple act of presence was enough to convey understanding. He had learned that lesson through this vigil, that endurance and empathy could achieve more than force or intellect alone. The artificial night cycle that had begun when he first arrived was nearing its end. Light shifted gradually across the chamber, bathing the walls in soft, warm hues. Outside, distant stars glimmered faintly, indifferent witnesses to the events within. Elias rose to his feet once more, stretching slowly to relieve stiffness in his muscles. The queen did not move, her presence steady and immense, yet no longer oppressive. It had become a space he could occupy without fear, a shared weight rather than a burden. "You have done what no one else could," she said, "and yet it was not through strength or cunning." "No," Elias replied, "just by being human, that's all I can offer." It was enough. That acknowledgement seemed to settle something within the queen's consciousness. She realized that her centuries of isolation, her careful management of thought and emotion, had been necessary for survival, but not for understanding. Understanding required openness. It required trust. It required a willingness to endure alongside another. "You will leave," she said again, softer this time, "and I will resume my duties, but I will not forget." "I won't forget either," Elias said, "and maybe that matters more than anything else." For the first time, the queen allowed herself to feel something close to relief. The vigil was not simply a test or a ceremonial requirement. It had become a moment of mutual recognition, a bridge between species and experiences. She had endured countless challenges, but none had changed her understanding of her own existence as profoundly as this simple human had. Elias moved toward the chamber's threshold. He hesitated for a moment, looking back. "Do you want me to come again?" he asked, a question layered with genuine care. The queen considered. She had never invited a visitor to return. She had never needed to, yet now the possibility felt natural, almost necessary. "Yes," she said. "Return when you can." "There is more to share," Elias smiled. "I will." He stepped through the threshold, leaving the chamber but carrying with him a sense of quiet accomplishment. The weight of the queen's presence remained, but it was no longer threatening. It had transformed into a connection, subtle yet enduring, like the current of a river beneath a calm surface. The galaxy outside continued as before, unaware of the significance of what had occurred within the queen's domain, but for those two beings everything had changed. In the following cycles, the conquered observed a remarkable transformation. The queen's psychic influence, while still powerful, was no longer destabilizing to passing species. Diplomatic interactions became smoother. Her subjects felt a subtle ease in communication, as if the shared mind had learned a new rhythm. Humans, too, were viewed differently. Their ability to endure, to remain calm in isolation, to connect without demanding or controlling, became a quality highly regarded among galactic civilizations. They were not the strongest. They were not the most technologically advanced. Yet they possessed a resilience and perspective that even the most ancient beings respected. Elias returned to his quarters, exhausted but content. The night had tested him in ways he had never imagined, yet he had endured. He had faced the vastness of the queen's mind and remained intact, not because he was stronger, but because he had chosen to stay. Humanity's quiet strength, the ability to endure, observe, and connect, had proven itself in a way no one had anticipated. The queen continued her duties with renewed clarity. She ruled with the same responsibility as always, but now her presence carried a subtle difference. She had shared, if only briefly, the weight of centuries with another. She had learned that presence alone could bridge isolation, and that patience and understanding could transform even the heaviest burdens. And somewhere among the stars, a single human had demonstrated the power of endurance, empathy, and connection in a universe that had never expected it. Through quiet persistence, simple observation, and willingness to remain when others fled, Elias had not only survived the vigil, he had changed the course of understanding between species, leaving a mark that would echo far beyond the chamber walls. The light of the chamber pulsed softly, a quiet testament to the night that had passed. Elias had departed, but the memory of his presence lingered. The queen's mind, vast and ancient, carried with it a new awareness, that even the smallest beings could alter the flow of time and consciousness simply by enduring, connecting, and remaining true to themselves. And that was the power of humanity, quiet, patient, and enduring, in a galaxy that had long underestimated them. The vigil was complete, yet it had only begun to unfold. Both human and queen had discovered a truth that would remain. Presence, patience, and empathy were as formidable as any weapon, as lasting as any empire. And in the quiet aftermath, as light settled and stars shone beyond the walls, the galaxy itself seemed to pause, sensing a shift that was subtle yet profound. Elias looked back one last time, saw the soft glow of the Queen's presence, and understood that endurance could shape history, even without force, conflict, or command. It was quiet, it was simple, and it was enough. And for the first time in centuries, the Queen of the Zalthari felt the weight of her role transform, from isolation into connection, from expectation into shared understanding, all because a human had chosen to stay.